Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel Social Research. Today, I will present some basic thoughts on gender and body. This presentation may help you to have a focused and well directed reading afterwards, and that will also help you to conceptualize gender and body in your future research. Let us begin with reading these shadows. Have a look at this picture with three human shadows. I will suggest that you make notes of the questions that I am going to ask now and also your answers. Identify man, woman, and the child among these 1, 2, and 3 shadows, and then describe the action or reaction of man, woman, and the child as you see in these shadows. Now, if you will relate the body in action as you identify and describe in these shadows, the common perception of the woman and the child's bodies are that they are weak, they are vulnerable, they are passive, and they are exposed to male aggressiveness and violence. On the other hand, the male bodies or men's bodies are strong, powerful, and they are so called naturally in a position to practice dominance. In this way, this so-called physical difference provide the biological essentialism to interpret gender discrimination, placing men as oppressors uh, and dominating position. Anyhow, the shadows you see here are not new to your eyes, and you may have seen several images, paintings, photographs, and animations that represent somehow a taken for granted notion of dominated men and oppressed women. Well, we can have a brief look at the first, second, and third wave of feminism. The first wave of feminism started with the perspectives of equality. So, equal rights and equal opportunities were the popular slogans during the first wave movement. The first wave moved a political stance to represent women in their political rights. During second wave, we see a focus on women perspectives where the equality of outcome was emphasized and the demand for separate institutional provision was raised. This wave was focused on social and personal lives of women. However, after beginning with the equality perspective and then the woman perspective, the third wave of feminism realized the differences and they emphasized on recognizing equal value of the differences. They also see how to manage diversity without discrimination. In this wave, the differences were not only related to man or woman bodies, but it also includes other sexual and gender orientations. Hence, gender was not no more a gender binary, I mean male or female, as the only categories. Overall, it seems that the concept of equality that was popular and it was very well seen in first two waves, it could not persist in that way, and it shift towards the concept of equity. Now, particularly with reference to the third wave, that is called the gender perspective, it is important that besides recognizing and acknowledging differences, the similarities of shared experiences and interactions be considered to provide a comprehensive and inclusive perspective. And this perspective should not be manipulated by the exaggerations of gendered violence and discrimination, where only the men are seen as dominant. As Malmstrom says, there is a need not to exaggerate and essentials gender differences, but to look for similarities between women's and men's shared experiences, interaction, and appropriateness of spaces. I have provided a reference of this article here, and I think it could be a good read if you like to learn more about it. Okay, now to understand how and why the concept of equality was debated, let us have a look at the difference between the concept of equality and equity. As you know, that equality tends to sameness, that is to give everyone same thing. But then it becomes problematic because not all people start from the same place. So, I did not see it much realistic. However, if you see the concept of equity that is related to fairness and justice, it is about providing equal opportunities. And it means that differences are there, and they should be recognized, but they can be managed if there is a consideration of fairness in providing equal access to resources, sources, and opportunities to all. Now, let us have a look at different ways we can see gender differences in different types of feminism. For example, the radical feminism. In radical feminism, the men are blamed to create differences to be used for discrimination. And patriarchy is one example that is targeted in radical feminism. Radical feminist either promotes an eradication of the differences, and they are known as radical libertarian feminists, or they promote a superiority of women by labeling the women differences as a pride to be celebrated and the men's differences as the devices for patriarchy. And they are known as radical cultural feminists. Another type of feminism is Marxist feminism. Marxist feminism situates capitalism and not the patriarchy. So for them, it is capitalism that created and fostered these differences to oppress and use women as subordinate because they produce labor force. And then another type of feminism is liberal feminism, and it is more focused on the idea that inequalities lies in the socialization and culture, and men and women both can experience discrimination and disadvantages. So they promote the idea of equality, such as equal opportunities. And then also we have a postmodern feminism. And postmodern feminism does not acknowledge the universality of feminist theories. Instead, they relate it to language, discourses of power relationships, and knowledge. Therefore, it is somehow more bottom up approach to see how the discourses of power are constructed in gender relationships and gender differences. Okay, to talk about body and embodiment, let me introduce you with a book that is called Body Politics in Development. It is written by Dr. Wendy Harcourt, and it is a useful reading that can inform you about interesting and important debates in body politics. You can say this book is a self experience centered book. On my channel, you can also watch my talk with Dr. Wendy, and you can learn more about this book. The link to the talk is given in the description, video description below. With reference to this book, I will briefly show you the entry points of body politics in population and development debates. First two entry points into the debate are Cairo Agenda in mid 90s and then Millennium Development Goals 2000. And these points are somehow overlapping in their agendas, such as in connection with reproductive rights and maternal health. Mainly, these agendas focus on gender equality, women empowerment, child mortality, maternal health, and combating HIV/AIDS. Then, another entry point is population health. However, the interesting entry point in all these debates is the silence throughout in these agendas about the reproductive male and non reproductive female bodies. So, this book that I will recommend you to read, it will unfold these entry points related to choices, services, rights, and provisions, and also the neglected aspects as mentioned here. Let us have a look at the relationship between human body and institutions. I will put here some questions that are easy to understand. And while I am sure that you can reflect on these questions, they will also be helpful for you to open your thoughts to see the interconnections of the institutions and their role in shaping our bodies. For example, a scientific approach to see our bodies is pretty clear, and they actually perceive the body as a complex system of organs. They also scientifically see these differences between male and female bodies. So, the scientific knowledge, such as from clinical psychology, biology, or other medical sciences, they provide us information about our body with a, so to say, a scientific authority that is difficult to deny. So, for this kind of technocratic model of understanding bodies as object, it is hard to deny them because they think or they showcase themselves as an objective sciences. On the other hand, the three institutes that is social, cultural, and political, they are interconnected, and they also provide structure of our bodies and what is normal about it. I mean, how these institutions see as normal. For example, gendered behavior in different societies and cultures should not only be seen as some sort of social or cultural sanction, but there is always a script. And this is social, political, and cultural script that move us to behave according to what is seen as normal. We can talk a lot about different examples that I'm not going to do here, but I will ask you some questions and then you can find examples to answer these questions. For example, how do these institutions shape human body? How do the structure of unequal bodies is informed or constructed by these institutions? And what is normal and how do we accept it as normal? Here, I was thinking about fashion industry. You see our clothing. How do we dress? And how do the fashion industry design the dresses for male and females? This is also very interesting. How would the fashion industry see, understand, and somehow shape our bodies? And yet, it is also about our choices when we buy clothes. Well, this is an important thought, and you can think about it and reflect upon it. In this slide, you see how stereotypes of men and masculinity may be constructed by four different yet connected perspectives. Such as we see gender inequalities as natural because human beings are born as male or female. This natural construct of gender is based on biological essentialism. Then we live and learn gender and gender appropriate behavior through socio cognitive learning and modeling and reinforcement. That is a psychological script we follow rest of our lives, and then that is also a psychological preparation to accept gendered behavior as normal behavior. Similarly, on social and cultural level, we follow and practice sanctions that define rules for gendered conduct. These biological, psychological, and social aspects of gender that situate men and women into different identities give way to gender polarization and androcentrism, in which male freedom is taken for granted. Generally, the biological and psychological representation of human body and brain, it is thought to be more objective and authentic because they claim as a scientific field. Hence, the claim about equality in sense of sameness may be problematic, at least in these grounds. Yet, social and political interest of a society or community may use these differences to construct gendered bodies, gendered behavior, and also gendered experiences. How a male body is represented in the literature about HIV and AIDS. This is another example to prepare yourself to read about the text using your reflexivity. So you may see that in the literature that is related to HIV and AIDS, the men are seen as perpetrators or infections. They are seen as powerful, they are seen as strong and dominant, who practice their authority or power in sexual relationships. And in this way, they try to dominate women's bodies. This is somehow you will find in literature if you Google it, and maybe you will find some other representation of human body in the context of HIV/AIDS. Now, this is up to you that if you are curious about it, just read the literature about HIV/AIDS and see how the men and women, I mean, how their bodies are represented in this literature. And then another example is reproductive technologies. So let us see how a female body is represented in the literature about reproductive technologies. We all know that reproductive technologies mostly deal with female bodies. These technologies are expensive and there is unknown risk involved in using these technologies. We also know that a global transaction in reproductive parts is a commercial and common phenomenon. So you see that with the development of the reproductive technologies, the concept of body as an object actually objectified the woman body. And on the other hand, the commercial aspects of use of reproductive technologies and the transactions of reproductive parts, it actually leads to commodification of women and their economic exploitation. Just think about infertile women and assisted reproductive technologies, and then think about a fertile woman whose body may be used as a container. Then you may also be able to sum up and connect whatever I said here, that uh, how these bodies are represented. More, you can also Google feminist perspective on reproductive technologies, and you can also read newspapers that report local and global transactions of reproductive parts and the huge economy involved in these trades. And by now, I have talked briefly about some core concepts related to body and gender and representation of body in literature. I hope this brief, but to the point presentation will help you to read further and think reflexively while reading. Now, I will talk a little bit about reproductive health. Reproductive health is a matter of biological, psychological, and social well being. Therefore, the embodied experience should be explored both for all genders. And it should include voices from their physical, psychological, and social experiences. This will also help the researcher to gain an experience near understanding of reproduction and agency. Okay, to conclude this talk, you can see in this slide I have provided some words such as fertility, contraception, reproduction, and these words are the concepts that will remind us why bodies are relevant and why we need contextualized and sophisticated biological and social knowledge about embodiment and lived experiences of human being. Uh, I will also suggest to think about these points while reading or researching reproduction as embodied experience. For example, how the human bodies are seen in pronatal and pro-baby societies. Reproduction is a burden or a responsibility or something else. Try to understand and situate bodies in their social and cultural context. How do the non-reproductive female or male bodies are seen or situated? Are they seen as sick bodies or the bodies that are not normal? How do the women and men uh, and their bodies are seen in use of reproductive technologies, and whose experience actually matters? Does global interest in reproductive technologies and universalization of knowledge and practice affect social and cultural aspects of agency? So, these are some of the questions and thoughts that you can have with you while reading literature about gender and bodies. Well, thank you very much. It was a brief talk. I have touched several things in this brief talk, but I am sure that this presentation will help you to give you a food for thought uh, to start reading about gender and body. I also expect that you will be able to reflect upon the literature, whatever you will read, and critically examine the content that you want to use in your study. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe my channel if you have not done it yet. Best wishes.